Nintendo is in a rough spot lately, is what people online want you to think. But let's really take a deep dive to see what's going on here. Ever since the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd, Nintendo has been the talk of the town, mainly for two big reasons: greed and that the games on the system are inadequate. Now, keep in mind, this video is just my opinion, so whether or not you agree, feel free to start a conversation in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe because we're halfway to 1,000 subscribers. And to celebrate hitting 500 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a giveaway for a $50 gift card of your choice, either Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, or Steam. All you gotta do is subscribe to enter, and the winner will be chosen once I hit 1,000 subscribers. I'll discuss prices first, as I think that these are the most significant cause for concern. Ever since 2020, prices have been going up in the gaming world. PS5 and Xbox retailed for $500, the game started costing upwards of $70, and online services saw price hikes. However, examples of this can be seen before 2020. The PS3 had a $599 price tag for its top model, and while not as significant, Nintendo resold Wii U games that were previously sold for $50 now for $60 on the Switch. Some of these were justified, such as 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. That added a whole new adventure, providing a worthy amount of new content and a few quality of life updates. But then, with Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, that had less than the bare minimum added, and that was also $60. These are both great games, but the pricing just doesn't really make sense. Nintendo didn't follow Sony or Microsoft since they were still rolling with their last gen system, the Nintendo Switch. However, prices never really went down either, as they typically do when a system has been on the market for a while. The Nintendo Switch has been on the market for 8 years and is still being supported as of 2025. Nintendo priced their updated model, the OLED model, at $350 in 2021, which I felt was a fair price. Although I do remember people complaining about this back then for some reason. Games also never really went down in price, although unlike what a lot of people say, I do see these games discounted. We just don't have things like Nintendo Selects anymore. Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, Smash Ultimate, Sonic Superstars, and Mario Wonder are just a few examples of games I saw discounted on Amazon. However, many retailers offer them at a discount, even though PlayStation and Xbox games tend to drop in price significantly more. Nintendo actually only priced one Switch game at $70, that being Tears of the Kingdom. I felt that this was the right choice in being the first game with the new industry standard price for Nintendo, and I actually don't recall seeing too many people upset about this. But when Nintendo announced their 9th gen system, or 10th gen, I actually don't know, I couldn't find anything out about it. I'll just call it 9th. When they announced the Switch 2, it sparked a lot of excitement, but also left a lot of people unenthused. Many people simply wanted a more powerful Switch for the next system, while others wanted Nintendo to completely reinvent the wheel, just as they had done many times before. However, it wasn't until the Switch 2 Direct in April when the negativity just started to roll in. Mario Kart World was $80, the system was $450, Amiibo were $20, the Pro Controller was $80? I could keep going, but you get the point. Prices were high, and Nintendo set a new industry standard by setting Mario Kart World at $80, and people were understandably upset. Nintendo used to be the more affordable option. The Switch was $300, and while you could get an Xbox Series S for the same price, it had no disc drive and was significantly underpowered compared to the Xbox Series X. Otherwise, the disc versions of the PS5 and Xbox Series X were $500 each. However, to make matters worse, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft raised the prices of their games, systems, and accessories in 2025. Xbox actually did it twice.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The Series X now costs $650, the PS5 now costs $550, and the Switch 1 now costs $340. The Switch 2 Pro controller is now $90, Joy-Con 2 are now $100, and we have Amiibo going upwards of $50. Now, I'm aware that this is not only due to high inflation over the last 4 years, but also due to tariffs that are being put on other countries right now, such as Japan. But companies don't have to raise prices. Here's an economic lesson from a college kid who's currently studying film. Tariffs are a tax on imported goods, and they raise the cost for the importing company. However, this doesn't mean that prices have to go up for the consumer. Companies can absorb the cost by keeping prices the same and taking a profit cut. Alternatively, they can adjust their supply by switching suppliers, sourcing domestically, or finding cheaper alternatives to avoid or minimize the tariff. However, more often than not, companies will simply decide to raise prices to cover the cost of the tariff, especially if the product is in strong demand and consumers are willing or forced to pay this new price. In short, tariffs do not require the company to raise their prices. Nintendo is a billion-dollar company. And while I'm not smart enough to know the correct answer to whether or not they should have raised prices, I personally don't think eating the price of the tariff would have killed them. The company has billions of dollars in reserves and extremely strong profitability. By keeping prices the same, or at least cheaper, it could have strengthened brand loyalty, especially at the start of a new generation. However, they wanted to protect their margins and please investors. Nintendo is a business after all. And that's not me defending them, by the way. That is literally me saying that they are in fact a company that wants to make money. However, I will defend them with keeping the game and console prices the same for the Switch too. Most games are still $70 and the console is still $450, which I think is a fair price for the system. As for game prices, my opinions are complex. I'm not a fan of $70 games. And more often than not, unless it's a Nintendo game, I skip out on buying new games priced as such. Before the Switch 2, I did it with just 3 games: Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, and College Football 25. That last one is only because my school is in the game. However, I think that we as a society have to accept that these major titles coming from big developers are going to be $70. And I've unfortunately come to accept that. However, what I won't put up with is how Mario Kart World and the Switch 2 Edition games are $80. I love World. I've made plenty of videos and shorts talking about how I feel, but I don't think it's worth that much money. And why are these upgrade packs so damn expensive? I would have thought that they would have discounted the Switch 2 re-releases. I think the upgrade packs being $10 and $20 is a fine price, but $80 for the whole thing? Why not just $60 and $70? Typically, when things are bundled in like this, you give it a slight discount to entice people to get it. You know how I know that's a thing? Because they did it with the stupid-ass Mario Galaxy Collection. These old games are being re-released for $40, which makes no sense because they were $20 on the Wii U eShop, and Nintendo themselves sold Metroid Prime Remastered at $40. Final Fantasy VII Remake is $40 on the Switch too, yet they want to charge $70 for the Mario Galaxy bundle? It's not even a Switch 2 game. Yes, they updated a few things like the resolution and textures, but my god, that's the bare minimum. If they fully remastered this game like Metroid Prime, I would be fully defending Nintendo. Imagine seeing this already fantastic game, because yeah, I hate the prices too, but we're not about to slander either Galaxy game. They're 10 out of 10s. But imagine seeing these games with Odyssey level graphics. Hell, we could have gotten graphics even better than Odyssey because this could have been a Switch 2 game. Unfortunately, I could talk about Nintendo's pricing for a very long time. This video would never end. Amiibo are ridiculous right now. Donkey Kong got a $20 DLC that should have been in the base game or just been a free update. And here's the thing, for people like me who are in a very fortunate position, I am going to be getting these products. Gaming is my hobby, and I do spend money on my hobby. Because even when the new Xbox and PlayStation release, I will most likely be getting those. Now, if they cost $800 because, you know, Xbox just had to raise their prices again, so now their most expensive Xbox is $800, I mean, my god. Sorry, I went on a tangent, but if they're not too outrageously priced, I'll be picking them up. But back to what I was saying, not everyone is in my position to where they can afford all of this stuff.
Back then, you could get a 2DS with Mario Kart 7 for $80, the price of a new game now. These new Kirby amiibo are more expensive than 3DS games, and controllers being $100 essentially locks kids out from getting them to play with their friends. If you want the new Mario Galaxy collection with the amiibo, that's $150 not counting tax. Back then, I could pick up Smash Wii U and 2 amiibo for $86 not counting tax.
Even if someone's in my same position and they're able to afford all of this stuff, they're probably not like me. They're not gonna spend all of their money on this junk.
I feel like that's why amiibo haven't been as prevalent since like 2014 to 2016. Also because Nintendo just doesn't give them any unique features.
The new Kirby amiibo are seriously the most unique amiibo I've been since like Yoshi's Woolly World and Mario Maker on the Wii U. With all of that being said, I am gonna move on to the next big issue that this video is being made on, the Switch 2 game library. I've been seeing a lot of talk going around that the games present and coming out are just bad, whether it's because they don't have enough content, or aren't like the last entry, or are underpowered compared to the PS5 and Xbox. Unlike the pricing argument, however, I'm not here to defend or justify people, because I just personally don't agree. First of all, the launch titles for this system were great. Starting the console generation off with Mario Kart World was honestly the perfect move from Nintendo, and Welcome Tour was a small cute addition to the launch. We also got GameCube on Nintendo Classics, and ports of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Not to mention that almost the entirety of the Switch 1 library is compatible with the Switch 2, with a lot of games getting performance boosts. Then, just a month later, we got Donkey Kong Bonanza, a powerful contender for Game of the Year, and one that I saw countless people online saying that they couldn't put down. And to list off everything else that's been announced or released for the Switch 2, we have Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 Edition, Drag X Drive, Kirby and the Forgotten Land Switch 2 Edition, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, Pokemon Legends ZA, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Kirby Air Riders, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and then next year we have Mario Tennis Fever, Virtual Boy coming to Nintendo Classics, Super Mario Wonder Switch 2 Edition, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, Pokemon Champions, Rhythm Heaven Groove, Splatoon Raiders, Pokemon Pokopia, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and the Dustblades. I just mentioned 19 games that we're getting in the first year of the Switch 2's life, and adding on the other ones that I talked about before, that's a total of 24 games. And while yes, not all of these are brand new, we have our fair share of ports, the Switch 1 only had 11 first-party games in its first year, and that had its fair share of ports. Not to mention that most of these ports were treated like major releases, whereas the Switch 2 editions of these games are not treated as such. However, the first year of the Switch was pretty legendary, not just for the IPs that they used, but the quality of these games was through the roof. That's not to say that the quality of Switch 2 games is bad. I actually think it eclipses the Switch 1. Bonanza takes everything Odyssey did wrong and fixed it while improving everything it did right to truly craft a perfect game. Mario Kart World is highly ambitious and a great addition to the series, but whether I think it's better than 8 Deluxe, well, I actually don't have an answer for this, but subscribe if you want to see me compare the two games in a future video. But all of the upcoming games look to be some of the best in their respective franchises. However, take what you will with that argument because the games haven't been released. I'm excited for games like Mario Tennis Fever, but the game could turn out just like the rest of the sports games over the last decade, and just be a soulless, boring sports game. And that can be said for literally all of these unreleased games. I don't think it would happen, but it could. Other issues people have with games, both first and third party, are that the games don't look as good as the PS5 and Xbox. And yeah, they're not wrong, but what do you expect? This is a 300-watt home system, and this is a 20-watt thin tablet. They serve different purposes, with one being a dedicated home system and the other being a hybrid system. With all that being said though, comparing the same games on both the PS5 and Switch 2, they still look very similar. And you know, I never saw people complain this hard when the Steam Deck launched or the ROG Ally launched and weren't as powerful as 9th gen hardware. I actually only saw people singing their praise.
games. I personally think that the Switch 2 is perfect for most people, because you get Nintendo exclusives and third-party games that usually wouldn't come to a Nintendo system because they've been so underpowered for the last few decades. And a lot of kids don't get multiple systems. It's either a Switch, PlayStation, or Xbox. And while the Switch won't be getting games like Spider-Man or Horizon, actually it totally could at this point, it's still getting games like Resident Evil, Final Fantasy VII, Elden Ring, and Cyberpunk, just to name a few games off the top of my head.
However, even with these games coming to the system, we still have to worry whether or not they're going to be game keycards.
Each time a game is announced to be coming to the Switch 2, I always have a looming anxiety that it's gonna be a keycard. And it makes the release of certain games on the system feel like an afterthought. For some games, I get it. Star Wars Outlaws and Final Fantasy VII needed to be keycards since Outlaws wouldn't run properly on an actual card, and Final Fantasy VII was too large to be put on a cartridge. But then why are games like Persona 3 Reload, Sparking Zero, and Pac-Man World 2 keycards? Hell, why the hell is Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 a keycard? I don't think these games would have had trouble being physical, especially because two of them are coming to the original Switch. I think when a game is too large to fit on a 64GB cartridge, or if it won't run as well, then keycards are a great option to have. Developers get to release their games semi-physically, and we get to have the physical copy with good performance. But as of now, I feel like developers are abusing them simply because they're cheaper than paying for an expensive cartridge. And I'm torn, because I want to get a lot of these games on the Switch 2, but I don't really like keycards all too much. All in all, the Switch 2 is a great system, and I've been loving it for the 4 months that I've had it.
Yes, the pricing issue is now more relevant than ever, and it is frustrating that a bad world economy plus the United States tariffs are causing prices to be outrageous. And I'm going to reiterate, I'm very fortunate to be able to afford this stuff, but not everyone is.
As for the games, I honestly don't see the issues others do. I think what we're getting is great, and that just because it's not a new Mario or Zelda, people are complaining that these other releases aren't good.
However, those are just my opinions, but what do you think?